Okay, so get ready, because today we are diving deep, really deep, into a moment in history that, well, let's just say it changed everything, World War I.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling this is going to be one of those deep dives that, well, sticks with you. It really changes how you see the world.
It's funny you should say that because a lot of people, they see World War One as just, the setup for World War Two.
Right, like the pre-show.
Yeah, exactly, like the opening act. But when you really look at it, World War One was this massive turning point all on its own.
Yeah.
It completely reshaped everything, the politics, the society, everything in the 20th century.
It's almost impossible, I think, to really, grasp how much changed because of it.
Right.
We're talking empires collapsing, new ways of thinking, new ideologies popping up.
Right.
I mean, where do we even begin to unpack all of this?
Well, maybe we could start with, just how big it was. This wasn't just, some fight in Europe. It was a true world war. I mean, it pulled in nations from, everywhere, every continent.
Yeah.
And the impact, we're still feeling it today.
Okay, yeah, I think we need to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
Can you set the scene for us?
Yeah.
Who were the major players here?
Okay.
And I know it's not as simple as good guys and bad guys.
No, not at all. You had, you had what were called the Central Powers.
Okay.
And that was mainly Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria.
Got it.
Then on the other side, you had the Allied powers.
Okay.
Primarily France, Russia, Great Britain, Italy, and then eventually the United States joined them too.
Right.
But, and this is important, those alliances, they weren't, set in stone. They changed, they shifted, they kind of evolved over time.
Yeah, yeah.
Which just makes everything even more complex, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it wasn't just, these big armies clashing on battlefields. This war, it touched everyone, everyday people, in ways that, I don't know, we could hardly imagine today.
Right.
Like, what was it like for the people caught in the middle of all of this?
Imagine for a second living in a world just consumed by this war.
Yeah.
Food is scarce, economies are just falling apart, and everyone is just living with this constant fear.
Right.
And then you have the soldiers, millions and millions of them, living in these just horrific trenches.
Oh, yeah.
Constantly being bombarded, surrounded by disease and death.
Yeah, the pictures we've all seen of those trenches, muddy, rat-infested. It's a far cry from, how some people might romanticize war.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I think the personal stories from this time are so important.
Right.
There's this one story about this British soldier, and he's struggling, right, to cope with losing his brother in battle.
Oh, wow.
So he starts writing letters back home, but get this, he writes them as if his dead brother is writing them.
Oh, wow.
Like he's trying to, I don't know, keep his memory alive.
Yeah.
Or maybe find some comfort in all this chaos.
That's really powerful. And it makes you think about, the mental and emotional toll.
Oh, absolutely.
The scars that, you can't see them, but they run so much deeper than any physical wound.
Yeah.
And, I think it reminds us that behind, all the big stories about empires and battles and all that, World War I was really, at its heart, a story about people.
Right.
About individual human experiences. Just countless acts of, of courage, despair, resilience.
And those experiences, they had a huge impact on how history played out. Like the war, it shattered these massive empires, the Ottoman, the Austro-Hungarian, the Russian empires. Think about that. Centuries-old empires just gone practically overnight. And that led to all these new countries being born. It completely redrew the map of Europe and the Middle East in ways that, we're still living with today.
It's incredible when you think about it. The ripple effects, like you said earlier, and I think it's important to go back to this because the war didn't really end in 1918, did it? Those ripples, they're still shaping our world today.
Absolutely. We can't talk about World War I without talking about the Treaty of Versailles.
Yeah.
The peace treaty that was, it was supposed to prevent future conflicts. But the thing is, the terms of the treaty, they were so harsh on Germany.
Yeah.
Especially the reparations they had to pay.
Right.
And that created so much resentment, so much instability. And, some people argue that's what set the stage for the rise of Nazism and eventually World War II.
It's almost like, the winners, in trying to create peace, they accidentally set the stage for an even bigger conflict.
Yeah.
And that's not even talking about the changes in thinking and ideologies that came out of this war.
Right, exactly. World War I really shook people's faith in the old ways of doing things, in traditional governments and and systems of authority.
Y-
I mean, it's not a coincidence that ideologies like communism and fascism, oh, well, they got really popular after this huge global upheaval.
hmm
People were, well, they were searching for answers.
Right.
They wanted new ways to understand the world and their place in it.
It makes you wonder, would the 20th century have happened the same way without World War One?
Yeah.
It's a question we can't really answer, but it shows us just how big of a deal this conflict was.
What's really interesting is that even though World War I ended over a century ago, we can still see, well, like echoes of it in our world today. Like,
Mhm.
think about it. The rise of nationalism, the struggle to get countries to work together, the challenges of, well, dealing with changing power dynamics.
Mhm.
These are all issues that, well, they have roots back in that era.
So if we, connect all of this back to our listeners, what would you say is the most important takeaway from understanding World War One?
Right.
Like, what should people be thinking about after listening to all of this?
I think the big lesson here is that history isn't just, a bunch of facts and dates. It's this, well, this complex web of interconnected events, ideas, and choices.
Yeah.
And World War I shows us that even the choices made with good intentions, well, they can have consequences.
Yeah.
Unintended consequences that can be felt for a long, long time.
Wow.
And I think that's something worth thinking about, especially as we face the challenges in our own time.
We've really only scratched the surface of World War One today, but hopefully this deep dive has made you, well, a little bit curious.
Yeah.
Maybe it sparked something in you,
Yeah.
to want to learn more about this really important time in history.
I hope so.
It's a story that, well, it still speaks to us today.
Mm-hmm.
And it teaches us valuable lessons about humanity, about conflict, and about how delicate the balance of power can be on a global scale.
It really is.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
See you then.